Okay, I have 5 o'clock. So we will call this meeting to order. Let the record show it is Wednesday, November the 18th, and this is the Community Redevelopment Agency meeting. Madam Clerk, if I need you to call the roll, please.
Yes, sir. One moment. I apologize. Bill was talking to me. I have Gary Paytow.
Here.
Samuel Hall.
Here.
And Jeffrey Jones.
Here.
Francis Kowalski.
Here.
And Art Graham.
I am here. Okay. I don't know if some of you heard that, but we're going to take a few things out of order. The first thing we're going to take up is downtown maintenance with David McDonald. Dave, are you there?
He's here, but he's having issues. I'm going to see if he can call in as an attendee, and I'll promote him to a panelist.
All right. Well, then I'll go ahead with Mark Evans, and then we'll come back to Dave.
Chandra, do you want David to call you on the phone, on the landline?
No, he needs to call in on the website portion of it. I'll get with David in just a second. I'll call him.
Okay. David, Chandra's.
All right, Mark, you're up.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'll just, as you guys know, in the CRA district, the Deck the Chairs will be coming up this weekend. So we're going to make sure that our downtown Cape officers are aware of that, and we'll be scheduling some heavier, probably on the more popular nights, the weekend night, that type of thing, the nights that they have any kind of assemblies or anything like that. As far as that, everything else is going good. A couple of the projects with the that you guys had funded, I know Francis had asked last time. I did talk with Ricardo with our IT department, and the company that's handling is from Orlando, and they had a COVID issue. The guy that was supposed to be up here doing it had been ill, so that's why they're running just a little bit behind. But I was told that we're hopefully by the end of the month we'll have it all the kinks worked out, and they'll finish the project.
Mark, I got 2 quick questions for you before I go to the rest of the board. First one, are we still closing bars and restaurants at midnight?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so either.
Okay, so that was released by the city council?
Believe so. I can follow up and check. I'll send a message here shortly.
I think that may have been through all 3 cities.
On that they are not closing at midnight.
Yeah, they're not. I think that was done with all the beach communities.
Okay. Second question, are we closing First Street between Sneakers and First Avenue North, kind of right there where Deck the Chairs are, or is that going to remain open most of the time?
No, so that'll remain open. The only time it will be closed, what they've done, because Deck the Chairs goes on for multiple days and weekends. If they have a secondary event that's come in there, for example, they're going to do the movie, they're going to do the Christmas movie in December. At that time, and when it gets crowded, the barricades will be there and in place. They'll just have to move them to actually block the streets. So let's say the first weekend, if we have an unusually large crowd, if it's a safety issue, then we do have the barricades in place, and they do have permission to go ahead and block it at that time. And then once the event slows down or that evening, then they'll go ahead and open them back up. But they won't be closed the entire time.
So you guys just play that by ear?
Yeah, we have the barricades in place down there. Now, the days that they actually have different events, like probably the day that they do the lighting, and then when they do the movie and stuff like that, we do have them in place, so they will be blocking for the evening at that time.
Anybody else got any questions of downtown Cape? Gary?
Commander, just a quick question. Anything further on the scooter ordinance that's being considered by City Council?
You're making my head hurt, Gary.
Sorry.
No, he's good at
that. Yeah.
We can check.
No, I do know that the city attorney, they're working on some stuff. I know that they'll probably be doing a moratorium for the scooters until we get them under control. when I say under control, once we come up with the proper guidelines. So I do know the city attorney and city council, I know they are working on that. And that should be happening very quickly.
There was some conversation about the owner ultimately taking space in a retail area somewhere. And that's where the scooters would be rented from.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in play because it's still new. It's new for the city. It's new for the pedestrians and the patrons, and it's also new to that business owner. He says that he has rented the space there at 6th Avenue North, the 100 block right down from Delicone. So he does have space there rented, and he was going to do it for storage originally. Then he said he was going to do it for the actual rental. And I think he is still coming to terms to figure out how he's going to do it. With that being said, I think scooters are catching on with other people as well. So before we have 3 or 4 of these national scooter companies coming in, that's why they're looking at doing a moratorium until we can come up with the rules and regulations that need to be put in place before that happens. But you also have to remember, we have to be very careful because the last thing I want, or any of us want, is I'm not going to have my officers out there on Christmas morning in the neighborhoods because people are going to get these things for Christmas, and we've got to get a handle on that. So we got to look at it really as a business aspect because, because they are getting more and more popular. I have them in my neighborhood. I don't think they're a bad thing, but they do have to be under control, and it's a little bit different if you're paying to rent it or if you own it. So rather than just do all the scooters, they're looking at from the business plan size for the rentals of it.
Well, I think we also, as you mentioned, need to really take a look at it as it relates to the skate park in the South Beach district, because down there's a lot of electric bicycles used and so forth down there. Mm-hmm. And, I've seen kids come zooming in and out of that skate park in front of vehicles, taking over the road, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, they're popular right now. I've seen them all over. I've got tons of them in mine. I just live right across the bridge between Beach and JTB, and we've got multiple. We don't have a lot of kids on them. We have a lot of adults on them, which who knows, that might be even worse because the kids can probably ride them better than the adults.
Yeah, and again, just going back to the downtown district, the concern that I just see is that recently there were some new ordinances passed as it relates to what types of, I call them vehicles or bikes, are allowed on the boardwalk. Well, and scooters are not one of them, but yet that's where they're being rented right there at Casa Marina on the boardwalk. So hopefully that's going to be seriously looked at and modified, I would think.
Yeah, I do know that that's one of the things they're looking at. Also, the area that they were being rented was the area, it's actually on private property. It's just just west of the boardwalk on that vacant lot, just south of the Casa Marina. And where it actually indents in, that's actually part of the Casa Marina because they own that lot. And so that's one of the questions that came into play is, okay, so if that's private property, you rent them there, but if you're not able to ride them there, how are we going to get them from there down to where they have to be ridden? So I know the city attorney, the city manager, I've had meetings with them as well. And the council a couple of weeks ago, they were briefed as well, saying that this is coming up. And we've got to start looking at it. We got to get a handle on it before it gets out of control, before we get a bunch of them. Which we have a lot now, but unfortunately there could be a lot more coming.
Thank you for the update.
You're welcome.
Art, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Any other questions for Downtown Cape? Nope. All right, Mark, thank you very much.
All right, y'all have a good evening. I'm going to log off.
Take care, Mark.
All right.
Thank you.
Chandra, do we have Dave McDonald with us yet?
I believe so. David, can you hear us and talk?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes,
cool.
sir.
Yes, sir.
What can I do for
Dave,
you?
welcome. Dave, welcome back.
Dave, I just
Thank you.
I wanted you to touch base with where we are. That we've secured a new concrete contractor, and just what you see going forward is, general time for when he's going to start working on some of our pet peeve downtown projects, the repair projects.
Yes, we have a contract in place. We talked to them about getting started. They asked if they can finish a couple projects. They were on schedule to finish the projects. Supposedly, and I'm not going to say that, anything bad or anything, but they said some of the folks, the COVID got them, so they're behind a bit, and they told me they're not going to start until right after the holidays. I just found that information out yesterday.
Okay.
About the COVID. Did you hear me?
Yes, sir. And just
Yes,
so
sir.
everybody will know, I just approved a requisition. The initial requisition was for $50,000 to begin funding the CRA portion of that repair work that they would do downtown. So from the fiscal end, we're ready to go on our side once they start invoicing us.
And I'm not going to doubt them. I'm not going to throw doubt on what they're saying, because everyone's having issues with that, including, the city and everything. So that's what they're telling us. Am I happy about it? No.
Dave, I don't think anybody's happy about it.
I understand.
One other point on downtown maintenance. I'm going to drive maybe this week, if not this week, the first of next week, drive downtown with Trevor Hughes. He's with our Parks and Recreation Department to start identifying areas where we can start doing some upgraded landscape maintenance in the downtown area. Trevor's already picked up on it. He's got some ideas, but I told him I wanted to ride around with him. And once we get an idea of what his focal areas are, I'll report it back to y'all and see if there's additional areas or if you think that's adequately covering the landscape maintenance part, because Parks and Rec does that. That's kind of the division of maintenance downtown.
Dave, can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right. Chandra, could you pull up that first picture? I was going to go through, you remember, I guess it was last year, me, you, and Bill drove around in the truck looking at some of these things. I just want to give the board the update on some of this stuff.
Okay.
Chandra, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm getting there.
Okay. I just want to make sure you heard me.
Yes, sir. Sorry. So this was
I see the
first
picture of garbage can holders.
Yeah, this picture, the first picture I took was on the right, and I showed Dave and Bill that trash can looked horrible. It was falling apart, and then Dave's crew came through and replaced it with the one on the left. That looks like the ones that we have all up and down the ocean front, and so we got a little bit more consistency there. Kendra, you can go to the second picture. This is the parking lot back behind what used to be Campeche Bay. And you had that pothole there in the middle of the driveway. Actually, it's funny. I think Dave's crew fixed that within the next day or two. Somebody just came along simply and patched that hole. So I thought they did it pretty quickly. Yeah. The next picture number 3. This is outside of Francis's window. Once again, the picture at the top was what it used to look, what it looked like when I showed it to both Dave and Bill, and that's what it looks like today. So once again, I thought they did a great job, and they were on top of that. Let's go to that last picture number 4. Now, this is the sidewalk over by Surfer. That sidewalk's the same if you're by Surfer, if you're by the Ritz, if you're by some of the other bars that we have out there. That's basically where they have the people lined up to go into the bars. I believe it's like either chewing gum or something that's on the ground there. If you can see what I circled,
that's what it is.
The one on the left was the first one, and the one on the right is the second. They came through and they power washed that, which I appreciate the power washing. But if you notice, right in that circle, even though the gum is gone, the stain is still there.
Yeah, the ghost.
Now, Chandra, you can take these pictures down so I can see everybody again. I don't know what the answer is for that, Dave. What should we be doing to try to get rid of that stain that's there? I appreciate you guys getting on top of that stuff and taking care of it, but and also I want to talk to the board about maybe we should hold those bars and restaurants responsible for, if they're going to line up on the city right away, then they should be responsible for getting that stuff up off of there, because there's no reason why most of those bars, I believe all of them, have another place to line people up where they don't have to sit there on city right away and cause that blight. But first question is to Dave. Dave, what can we do to get rid of that, as you called it, the ghost, that stain?
Yes, if you look at I've been down in other municipalities too, and that's a problem everywhere. The gentleman that we're using to clean that, you know, he has some stuff that he wants to try, so we're going to be implementing a few things on trying to get rid of them. You know, we don't want to tear the concrete up or the pavers or anything, so, but within the next couple weeks here, we're really going to try to get rid of that, because that's one of my big pet peeves too. That bubble gum kills us, man. Bubble gums and cigarette butts.
Yeah.
So I will let Mr. Mann know, and I will let everybody know exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it, and we'll take pictures before and after, and I will let you know. But we're going to try to diligently get on that. So, I mean, it's a pain. You know, with the pressure washers, they can heat that up to over 200 degrees, so that'll blow the gum right off. So we got to add a little chemical to that to try to get rid of the ghost. What's in that concrete.
Well,
that's an answer for you, but that's it. Yeah.
I definitely appreciate you guys getting on top of that, and I understand about the concrete. I know that's kind of like a thorn in your guys' foot. It is in mine as well, but it sounds like at least we have a plan.
Yes.
Jeff, you have a question?
Three things in reverse order. On that gum thing, you know, my proposal to Sergeant or Commander Evans, that they do something with the bars and not allow them to have lines on the sidewalk and out into the street, that would address in part the gum issue. But that's, I guess, for another discussion. I wonder if, David, you could give us a list of the CRA projects on that concrete repair list, just to make sure we're on a common understanding on what's being fixed.
Did you say that you want the list of the concrete?
Well, yeah, just identify the CRA, the projects within the CRA that your contractor will be working on.
Yes, I can provide that list. I can give it to Mr. Mann, and he can give that to everybody, if that's good.
Since, let me just ask about the two critical ones from my point of view. One is the roundabout on First and Beach, where it's been demolished in the center for a couple years now. And the other one is my pet peeve, which is the sinkhole that was asphalted over right between the tavern and the Ritz parking lot at the intersection of First Street and 3rd.
Yes, sir.
And that's on the list?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, yes. Especially the sinkhole. It is on the list. Okay.
And then finally, for Bill, is there any possibility I could go on that ride along with Trevor?
Yes, sir. Let me find out from Trevor. We've been playing phone tag. Our schedules haven't meshed. I thought I would have already had it done, but since I haven't, I have no problem with it. I don't imagine he would either.
Okay. So any day but Tuesday would work great for me.
Okay.
And I can make Tuesday.
Bill, did you have?
Sorry.
Yes, sir, I did. I want to ask David a question. David, when we're the pressure washing, when they do their sectors, they do the pressure washing work. Are they following up with a sealer after that?
Yes.
Okay, so that should prevent future ghosting from new gun stains. That makes the gum come up easier. I would presume that sealer. So we're still just looking at the ghosts that are out there now from however long they've been. So it's really two different issues. I think the cleaning that they're doing a good job. And just by sealing after they clean, that should prevent ghosting from future gum that goes down. It doesn't eliminate the problem we're dealing with.
Yeah,
yeah. It's helping prevent more.
But with any sealer, you know, it'll wear after time, especially with all the foot traffic and the bicycles and the skateboarders. So it does wear, like, you know, even on the pavers in the road, we seal that, but when you have people coming doing burnouts and, I mean, and then you have, you know, even a street sweeper, we don't use brooms too much, more of a vacuum, but it, you know, it takes its toll. I mean, it's money well spent in my opinion, but it does wear. I ain't gonna lie to you.
That's part of why we do it annually.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Any other comments or questions of Dave and Don while we have him on the phone? Gary?
You're muted. Oh.
David, good evening. And I think that some of my comments may not be specifically items that you're involved in, but I just want to bring them to everyone's attention. I would also very much like to do that drive-through with Jason, but I know that presents a little bit of an issue. But at some point in time, I'd like to do it because I've got quite a number of items that really need to be taken care of in the downtown area. One of the areas, I'm not sure if this was specifically mentioned when Jeff brought it up, but were you talking about the pavers that were missing at the inlet on First Street? And I think it's roughly 3rd Avenue North. In that area, there's asphalt that's been put in around the inlet rather than pavers. And I think that's one thing we need to take care of.
That's one of them, yes.
That's the sinkhole we were talking about.
That's the sinkhole.
Yeah,
there is another.
That's the infamous sinkhole.
There is another sinkhole when you go to 2nd Street, 6th Avenue North on the southwest corner. There's a pretty good depression in that area where if a car hits it or I hit it with my bicycle, it throws everything out of whack. The potential of a accident there. Throughout the downtown district, there's a bunch of utility boxes, the cable boxes that have the covers missing. It looks messy. Some of them have been hit by cars. Others are just destroyed for other reasons, but somehow we need to get the cable companies in here to clean up their act a little bit and improve not only in the downtown district, but also in the South Beach district. There's a number of areas where there seems to be not a real attention to lawn maintenance. There's areas where there are right-of-way areas that really need some attention. And I don't know whether the folks that are responsible for doing the lawn maintenance are just not aware that those are public property and need to be taken care of. But I think there needs to be some further conversations in reference to that. Along the downtown area, there are quite a number of bollards that are broken, ripped up the pavement around it. The pavers are coming up. Someone needs to take a look at that. And then recently I've noticed that the number of the public bathrooms have had signage on them that said that they're not in use or not available for use at this point in time. It looks like the public bathrooms really need somebody to take care of them, you know, do a better job of fixing them, and also just improving the quality of them. That if you walk inside of them, many of them need to be painted and taken care of. There's a lot of corrosion occurring on the exterior side of the public bathrooms. So I've got quite a list, and this list is not only for the downtown area, but also for the South Beach area. And whoever I need to sit down with and talk to, I'd be more than willing to walk, you know, each of those areas and get a little bit more specific on these items.
Well, Gary,
well, you know where I work, buddy.
I'm sorry?
Gary, since Jeff is already going on that ride along, you won't be able to go because it'll be more of a sunshine issue. Yeah. But if you can get that list to Bill, when he's riding with Trevor, he can share the things on your list, or the three of those guys can look at all that stuff, and they'll just report back to us.
And restroom maintenance is specifically a responsibility of Parks and Recreation and not Public Works. So it's just a matter of getting the right people. That's part of what this program manager position, when they come on board, that's why we'll have somebody 40 hours a week to be able to take the, take the reins over on that.
Francis and then Sam.
Bill, that was exactly what I was just asking. That list that Gary was adding to what we already have done in the past year, I'm assuming someone has been keeping track of that to give to our project manager. Is that the case?
Any one of your individual specific lists, that needs to really be vetted as a group. We don't need, I've got 5 members. I don't need 5 different punch lists of what individually we think we need to do. Y'all need to
I thought that we had already gone through a lot of the things. We all kind of agreed, and so we may not have voted on it. So are we needing to put together a list that we all can look at and say, yes, we want this to be a task for this new project manager to start? Is that what we need to do?
Yes, as opposed to individually putting out, yes.
Okay, then I would propose that we all work on that and get that to you so we can have that discussion at our next meeting. So I would like to make the proposal to do that.
One thing, that's fine. One thing I want to tell you about this is the current state of COVID and the governor's orders and the local orders. We're meeting virtually tonight. I intended on us having a live meeting, but the Board of Adjustment has training, and their live training trumps the need for us to be live. Because we're in a virtual environment, we can no longer make decisions you can no longer make decisions as a board virtually. I fully intend, remember we talked about scheduling the December meeting, I intend for that to be a live meeting. So even if it is a special workshop and not a regularly scheduled meeting, if there's something you need to take action of as a group, we'll be able to do it, because hopefully we'll be meeting in person.
Right, so I would just like to volunteer. If we find that we don't have our project manager yet and you can't pass those lists from each of us, I would propose that you send them to me, if that's okay with the board, and I'll put a spreadsheet together to present to the group and give to you if that's something that would help get this moving along, because we originally talked about this months and months ago, that we wanted them to have a task list to jump on and they could figure out where to go from there. And there was some discussions about a tracking list, and that was well over a year ago. So if that's something that needs to be done, I'm happy to do it. Just make sure you send them to me. I don't know if we have to vote on me being able to do that or not, but that is something I'm willing to put out there.
Okay, well, that's my point right now. We can't together sit there and vote virtually right now. We can't do that.
Right, I know, but at least I can say, why don't you guys all send stuff to Bill, and Bill can send it to me, and I can put the spreadsheet together for our next time that we sit together. So that's just something I want to throw out there. And then I wanted to ask, on the same topic, where do we stand, or are we going to talk about where we stand as far as a new project manager for the CRA? Has anyone been interviewed? Have resumes come in? Where does that stand? Because we, I don't know.
I have got no.
Yeah, we're going.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Art.
We're going to talk about that, but we skipped over that because we want to take care of both Mark Evans and Dave McDonald.
All right, thank you.
Sam?
Well, yes, I hope you can hear me, because I'm getting an indication that my cable is unstable. But yeah, it's just a small item. There where the veterans monuments were, they've been moved over to the park, and I think it's a great location. But where they were, there are huge holes there, and they're a trip hazard right there on the corner of, I think that's 2nd Avenue. I don't know if that's a work in progress or what, but it's just obvious that it can be a trip hazard.
I can speak to that briefly. That's the responsibility of Public Works. Parks and Recreation, because they were the ones that relocated. I will tell you, in the Dick Site Art Master Plan, that location was called out as a focal art piece location. And I will tell you, additionally, our new mayor, or mayor-elect, also sits on the board of the lifeguards, the lifeguard corps. And they have been, for several years, very interested in having some type of sculptural statement that lends, or shows in a positive light the life-saving corps. So that may be the opportunity to do that in that location. And it makes sense because it leads right up to the lifeguard station and to the beach. But there will be a piece of artwork there. And before that, that's one of the places Trevor and I are going to look at. We'll make sure at least it has a presentable appearance until we get whatever the programmed art piece to go in there will be.
Any other questions or statements or comments? We got Dave McDonald on the line. Okay, Dave, thank you very much. I know we kept you over today, but we appreciate your
it's all right.
And your involvement.
Thanks, David.
I appreciate this, and I can encourage the cable companies about the boxes. I will get on that first thing in the morning. And I will also check out 2nd Street and 6th Avenue, just see where that depression is. So I will be getting with Mr. Mann on that too. So y'all have a good evening. Be safe, okay?
Thanks, Dave.
All right. See ya.
All right. Before we leave this issue, we talked about having those bars not line up on the city sidewalk. If we were going to address that issue, I guess we'd have to address it the same way we did the trucks in the road. We'd have to come up with a plan or come up with some kind of legislation and then make recommendations to the city council, and then they could either run with it or squash it. And I guess my first question I have is, before we start going down this path, is this something that you guys are interested in pursuing? You can just raise your hand if the answer is yes. Okay, it looks like it's unanimous. All right, we'll circle back around. I'll get with Bill and we'll talk about this again, probably sometime in December or January. Bill?
One good thing on that, that's what's a good opportunity to use our CAPE officers that are funded by the CRA, because they're on the street every day and at night during the peak entertainment hours at night, and they can do soft encouragement. It may be that we get voluntary compliance without having to do formal regulation. So I think we ought to start. I realize I think Mark's out of the meeting, but that's something I'll talk to them about. I think they would have no problem taking up the reins for that.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Toolbox. Discussion items A. Mr. Mann, what's the toolbox all about?
Sorry. Yeah. One of the tasks that Gilmore Hagan Partners was contracted with to do was to come up, and this is the last item of that initial contract work, was to come up with an incentive toolbox to use both for retaining existing businesses and to encourage new businesses in the downtown area. And Jim and Taylor have come up with a fairly substantial list, and they're here tonight to talk to you about it. I thought I touched something.
No, I just got to take myself off mute. Thank you very much, everyone. And let me say before we begin, I'm very happy to note that the internal communications process that we developed and discussed with you recently is in play, with having a regular basis. Of course, we have Mark, but to have David McDonald today is part of that, and part of the program will be moving forward is to have one of the significant people have a discussion and be present at least at each of the other meetings for conversations, and then to proceed to have at least reports, if not in person, then written, so we can have a status list of where we are on some of these things. So congratulations to everyone, and to Bill, thank you, and the administration for helping make this, implement that internal communications process. Incentive toolboxes. Incentives are used by municipalities and cities and redevelopment agencies to, quite frankly, work to cause and create additional capital investment and jobs. They are to be used, in my professional opinion, judiciously when necessary. Judiciously and when necessary. And I define that by developers. If you want to, and this will be something I hope we get into in later times when we talk about the redevelopment plans for South Beach and downtown, how do we use them to make sure they're used effectively to cause the right development to occur? It's always been thought that if you've got strong interest and strong markets in your areas, then quite frankly, then potentially you should use incentives less, because you don't want to, as you do due diligence, to have someone, quite frankly, come in and take advantage. And in our career, we've seen that a bit, and we don't like that. We want to use them judiciously and appropriately that we'll work on. And what we've designed here are simply giving you examples of things that can be done and have been done that can achieve the objectives of the redevelopment plan. And we would take these and apply them to them. And I'd just like to go through them with you briefly and answer any questions that you have. The RECAPTURE Enhanced Value Grant. And as I talk about this, when we talk about use of incentives, what we're really talking about is public participation to make a project to occur. And that's what we're talking about. And frequently that involves some type of cash participation after analysis that again is going to achieve the objective, whatever it might be. One of the more popular tools that's being used recently around the state and elsewhere is called the RECAPTURE Enhanced Value Grant. And that's appropriate because that doesn't require any upfront. And do we have a slide on that? Or are we just going to take these one at a time? Okay, there you go. The RECAPTURE Enhanced Value Grant. And I'm hoping that this toolbox slide deck will be provided to you so you can look at it and come back with any additional questions that you might have. In effect, a REV grant is designed to bring the capital investment into it. And the way it works, no upfront cash is required on the municipality. And in your tax increment district, as you know, you've got the base year, and every increase in that goes into the trust fund. It's very similar to that approach. If you got someone that says, I've got to have X amount of dollars to make this work, and you can negotiate with him to make his pro forma work for his development project, then you can take a portion of the new taxes that he's going to create and rebate that back to him. It's in effect a tax rebate program. You would never necessarily want to give it all because you want to have some for your tax increment district, but it really makes a big difference to a lot of developers as it relates to whatever it might be, whether it's hotels or housing or some type of special retail development. And it's a good way, and based upon an analysis of the necessity for the grant. And you've heard me say this about judiciously and appropriately, and I always come back and say it. This is public money we're talking about, and we want to make sure it's absolutely necessary, and that in addition, once an agreement may be negotiated, that there are provisions in there that if the developer does not produce, he does not get it or he has to pay it back. Again, lots of different techniques, but the basic premise about a RECAPTURE Enhanced Value Grant is it's a tax rebate to cause him to produce the project to help make his numbers work on his development. The next one.
Jim, I just want to add really quick there. It's the developer will be paying their taxes in full and then they get it back.
Well,
it's
yeah,
not,
it's a rebate. It's
yes.
a rebate. He pays them and you rebate it back to them. Period.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it's negotiable depending on what we want to do. As it says in the point, it's paid annually after construction, and then they get paid when they pay it. Next one. Parking participation. Parking is an issue in Jack's Beach, as we know, and we hear from lots of different people. And there are lots of ways, again, to approach that. And this is just a small example of it. You've got land. And a lot of times the land cost to produce parking is most expensive. You can, by the way, one method is you buy the land, you build the parking garage, you lease it, you make it work. And you can guarantee or not a number of spaces to a private developer. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes if a developer really needs parking, and I know there is at least one developer that does want parking in the downtown CRA, that potentially a land deal could be made where you lease the land or sell the land, and you agree to lease back from him a certain number of parking spaces for guaranteed public use, and he finances and builds it, and he gets the remainder for his own use. Just an example. You can also make an outright cash grant to offset the cost, again, to be paid upon completion of the project, but always keeping in mind having a guaranteed number of public parking spaces always available to the public. Because to participate in parking with the developer, at least that's always been a very important principle. Certain number must be available to the public for their use, whether you lease it or provide cash grant, lots of different ways to approach that. As we've learned from talking to some of the developers interested in Jack's Beach, some of them have been interested in building the garage themselves if they can get some way to have some land and at the same time make public parking back to the public for its own use. And that's something that you would control. It's a little bit of a different twist where the public sector builds it and then leases back to a private developer. In fact, it's just the opposite. The private sector develops it. The municipality participates and they get to lease back a number for their own use. And that's sort of a business deal. It's kind of exciting in some way. If you're leasing it back from the developer at X rate, if you want to make money, You can sell the spaces, assuming you're going to charge for them at Y rate, so you can recover some of your cost into the deal. Next slide. Site preparation. The CRA can use TIF funds for horizontal site work to prepare a pad for vertical construction. This is easy when you own the land, but the point there is if you've got a new development and in downtown or South Beach, you want a developer to do something or a developer wants to do something, how can you make his numbers work to cause him to produce the project? Because that's always the first principle. You can use TIF funds for infrastructure work, required traffic improvement work, and for make the pad ready for development. You can put in right-of-way landscaping and other items. You can take a look at the development pro forma of what he's going to produce and look at those items that logically could be funded as an infrastructure component to help the developer produce what he's going to do. As in all cases, you've got to make sure the developer is going to really do what he's going to do, and you're not going to do our part until you know he's going to do his part. Next slide. Again, general infrastructure support, that's what you're doing right now. With all that work you're doing down there, that is general infrastructure support, and one cannot emphasize what a tremendous assist that is to private development. I would suggest to you that to a great degree, the interest in development that's occurred in the last number of years is because folks know that you have put stuff in the ground that impacts resiliency and helps make it better. And however, if sometimes there is a specific project where other specific infrastructure might be required, again, same principle. You've got to make sure there's, for the developer to get this additional assistance, whether it's road improvements, access improvements, that the developer's on the line to produce. You're not going to do it ahead of him, but in concert with him. And there are some guidelines there. Generally, if you're going to infrastructure, 25% of total proposed project cost is sufficient, but it's also depend upon what the impact will be. And again, a detailed analysis of the deal. And a great deal of business analysis to make sure all of this is required. Next slide. Commercial development program. Now, this is something that you might be interested in. And this one and the next one will tie together on that. Again, this is a variation of the tax rebate that we discussed. If you know that you want retail development in your redevelopment area, okay, and you know someone's going in with a lease, and you know he's there and he's going to actually complete it, we can, again, using the same principle, knowing that he's going to be in there to develop it and it's going to stay there, you can provide what this is called a real estate tax recovery grant, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing where they would get a portion of their taxes rebated back to them to put in that retail space. But the expenditures have to be a certain amount, it has to be there. And more importantly, and this is something that a lot of times it's missed, is if it's a developer-owned retail space, and this one is designed to go particularly to a tenant, then the rebate grant has to be assigned back to the tenant by the landlord to make it happen. But everybody wins. Developer wins, the owner of the property wins, and we win because you have provided an incentive for a type of retail facility to go into the area or any other type of commercial office space that you're interested in having. Real estate tax recovery grant. Next slide. Again, these are just examples of how it could be done, suggested criteria for a community development program, commercial development program. I like that last line. I always say this, it's subject to standard underwriting criteria. We're giving them a break, but standard underwriting criteria. I gave a little bit more descriptions about that because I know, at least in downtown, that there is a great deal of interest in promoting additional commercial development and retail development. which is why I put some more detail in on that particular element. Next item. Next slide. Facade renovation and landscaping grant program. Jack's Beach has had this before. And this is actually a grant program. And it's designed to improve, excuse me, just improve the exterior of the building itself where the developer or the owner of the property might not want to do it. And it could be that this is an incentive to cause people to want to do it. Potentially some of this could come into play for some of the other items we were talking about a little bit earlier. But it's a match program. The developer might have to spend, you might give them $1 for every $2 that has to be spent to make it work. All of this has to work out. But here's what we were talking about before. When you were talking about Art, about going back and looking at some of the conditions around some of the improvements that are in the right of way of where the bars are particularly. Funds can be used for renovation of fronts and sides of buildings, painting, cleaning, staging, masonry repairs. This is something that can be put together, again, as an incentive to property owners to take care of it and to make sure that they keep it in clean and good repair on a regular basis. And you've had it before, and it's worked well. Retail Enhancement Grant Program. I like this one a lot because I suppose, quite frankly, it was something that I helped create. If you've got, and it's different from the tax recovery program because this one goes directly to the property owner itself. Retail Enhancement Grant Program, if you've got a restaurant, a retail business that you want, it's considered to be a recoverable loan to a property. That's the difference. That pays for the cost of fixing up a facility for a tenant to go in there. The tenant has to be in there, and the tenant has to stay there for a certain period of time. And if not, then the developer has to pay it back, as opposed to us giving him a tax rebate. In this case, we've got cash that would go in to fix up the facility sufficiently enough to attract a retail interest that might not do it otherwise, but that person has to be in there for X period of time, has to be consistent with a redevelopment plan. Funds can be used to retain existing businesses or new businesses, and if they don't, at the recoverable grant, if they don't stay in there a certain period of time, the developer has to pay the money back to the city. That is an extremely important nuance. First place, you're giving them back taxes. Second place, you're giving them money up front. And if they don't produce, then the agreement would cause them to have to pay it back over a certain period of time. Next slide. But again, I really like this a lot, which is why I put a lot of detail in on how this could potentially work. I invite you to read it rather than me going to it bullet by bullet, and we can talk about this at another time. And I know that you've got copies of it, but this one has really, really worked really well when you're trying to attract businesses to an area in the retail component that you really want to make it happen. I've heard so many times saying, well, we want restaurants, we want to get them here, but they're not particularly interested in. These type of grant programs can serve as a necessary incentive to get the product in there that we want to see. And this particular suggestion is that the grantee has to remain there for 5 years, and they've got to create some jobs, and renovation projects can be could be as much as $20 for every square foot lease, depending on what it is and how it works. But we don't want it to pay for all of it. This suggests that it should not exceed 50% of the total cost. Again, items to consider and think about if this is a tool that we would want to use downtown. And I told you that it was a recoverable grant or a recoverable loan. It's a loan, but it is forgivable. It's a forgivable loan to get that in there because they're going to be paying additional taxes too. And at the end of the 5 years, depending on what's there, and by the way, these are all fungible, it could be 5 years, 7 years, whatever, then the loan would be forgiven and it would be a true grant. It would only be paid back if something happens and the business leaves within that 5-year period or whatever period we would determine is appropriate to attract what we want in the downtown and South Beach area. Next slide. Again, examples of what it could be used for. And I gave a lot of details on this because I know we've been talking about wanting to bring in additional retail work in our downtown area. So that's why I'm giving you this. One thing is important, ineligible grant expenditures, no working capital, no space on a speculative basis. They've got to have real tenants. You don't need office equipment or some of those other things. But you can see some of the other items that could be a part of it to make sure that it works. Next slide. This is one that, quite frankly, and again, I put everything in the kitchen sink in this presentation for consideration, but to a great degree, much of these items have already been taken care of. You've got your redevelopment district zone in place, but it's always a good thing to look at the land use and zoning issues to see what could be done to help spur development. Fast track permitting is easy. Special permitting, you could waive potentially, this would require legislative action, or potentially use TI fund to fund permit fees to make it happen. And then you own land. And if you sell that land, you could potentially establish a trust fund in addition to TI funds to support the retail enhancement grants or whatever else we want to use. But the use of land disposition funds is always really important in my mind so that you've got a clear idea within the context of the plan of how you would want to use those funds. And you got to have money for retail enhancement grants or other uses, but the land is part of it as well. Next slide. I think that may be it. I put this in here because I do not know enough about Beach's utilities and how they work. Bill and others would, but this has been done in other cities and other redevelopment areas around the state. I'm not suggesting that anything that this should be done or could be done. I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying is that depending on the product and the desire to have it in place, that if feasible, if possible, if there's support, there could be an electricity incentive again to help make it work, where they would get a reduction in credit based on what they have to pay based in over a year. A lot of electric utilities have that. For large users, they call it an economic development component. And I put that in there again, just so that folks could think about it. Maybe we could do it, maybe couldn't do it, doesn't matter. But I don't want to say that I didn't give you everything that we could think about in terms of incentives to cause development to occur. Next slide. This is a very important one. And I'm a great believer in this. We talked about lots of ways and means in which incentives could be applied. I happen to think it's very important, and I put this in here for your consideration. I've got to take a little bit of water here. What is the return on investment to the public sector for funds or some way that you would participate in the project? And I hope you do. I think this is very important. And one way that you could do that is based upon the city and the CRA's return is based upon the increase in ad valorem taxes. What is that? The second thing that can be measured is induced taxes. And when I say induced taxes, what I mean is if there are a certain number of employees, or if it's a restaurant, a certain number of business that's coming out of that, one can estimate what the expected expenditure is going to be in the community from that business by employees or folks simply coming to eat. That gives you a measure of what total direct city revenue might be. And this is simple, but it really does work. And then you've got the total city investment, and then C divided by D gives you E, which is a ratio where it's suggested it's greater than 1. Project breaks even, direct return more projected revenue than total cost. Equal to 1, breaks even. Less than 1, but positive, but the city generates revenues to recover a portion of its costs. Less than zero project does not recover any of the public investment costs, and the city revenues are less than they would have been in the absence of the program. This return on analysis by return on investment formula is being used more and more throughout the state, and I highly would recommend, as we move forward and think about best ways and means to use incentives, that we do have return on investment analysis that can be easily documented and explained to all of the constituents and to everyone, so that we know what kind of bang we're getting for our buck. Next slide. That's it. I've just given you a lot of information that I hope will cause a lot of questions as you look at it, read it, and think about it, and we talk about it again. I come back to the first statement. Incentives should be used judiciously and appropriately, and I would add, to meet the objectives of the redevelopment plan itself, as we think and talk about how we want to focus to do that. And then I would come back, as you look at that, think about questions. We'll take questions now, and then go back at the end. I'm a great believer that when you use public sector dollars to incent any type of development, that we do it not only judiciously and appropriately, my favorite catchphrase tonight, but also that we have a ways and means to estimate and measure a return on the public investment to the public sector for what we're doing. With that, I need another drink of water. And I didn't realize I didn't have my video on, but there I am.
Francis?
Thank you, Art. I have two questions. Thank you for this. It's actually very, very helpful to understand a lot of these things that we don't get exposure to. So thank you for that. But in any of your, and I've mentioned it a few different times, and we as a board have not discussed it, and we haven't even made the steps to propose to the city council some other incentives. But is there any kind of incentive platform out there, or a city you have experienced or seen where they came up with incentives that changed the build out ratios and percentages?
That is a fair question.
With like, you know, like some greenage percentage and some pedestrian percentage, is there any kind of precedent to do something like that?
I have to tell you, Francis, that is an excellent question. That is a land use and planning issue.
Okay.
I have to be, and I have seen where that has been done, but I'm going to be honest with you and say that is not in my area of expertise. That's where I would go to an expert like Bill Mann to talk about some of those things. And in fact, interesting that you should say that. We had a meeting in the last 2 weeks, maybe the last week, I don't remember. But you remember we were sitting down and you were talking about some of those things and how that could work. And so I always throw that question back to a very serious land use and zoning expert on how that can work to cause development to occur as well. And you've already looked at some of that in the document too.
Right. So that's in our comprehensive plan and all that other stuff that I dug into as well when I shared with the group. So I'm still not quite sure if that's something that council changes or if it's actually a voted upon legislation change. I don't know the process of that, but that might be something as the board we may decide to address. So I'm not quite sure. Bill, do you want to say anything about that until I get to my second point? You're on.
Can't hear you, Bill.
Just one brief comment about that. It has been discussed, and I believe all the council candidates, maybe including yourself, you can tell me if I was wrong, they were generally supportive of at least trying to revisit the downtown building height. That type of intensification of maybe ground level development could be tied to bonus height increases. Pull off the street, give us some pedestrian plaza space. They do it New York City's famous for doing it. You know, we'll give you extra building height, but guess what? You're going to create a public plaza that's accessible to everybody on the ground level, put art features and stuff out there. That's how they get a lot of those great public spaces in bigger cities. And that component when and if the referendum gets out to the city for, to think about revisiting the height cap.
And that's what we done. And that's driven by the city council, not by us then, right? Because they're
and also
they're in charge of the comprehensive plan.
Right. The intensity of development is specifically addressed in the comprehensive plan, and that would require an amendment to the plan to do that. But people amend their comprehensive plans on a regular basis.
In that regard, Francis, if I may, on that same point that you were just asking Bill about, the city manager has a lot of experience with how some of that was done where he came from before he came here. There are a lot of examples around the state, including I went through a process that seemed to take forever for a new downtown Jacksonville overlay zone that did exactly what you're talking about, a little bit different, to ensure that there was plenty of public space, no blockage of river views, no canyons, no high rises. There was a very complex complex zoning overlay that was then adopted by the city council, not the Downtown Investment Authority, but it was developed with developers to ensure that everyone could achieve what they wanted to achieve, that you had developable parcels, but you also protected open space, right-of-ways, public space, and you protected, in Jacksonville's case, river views without having them being blocked off.
Okay.
So there's some really good work that's been done on that.
So basically, since that's more of a council-driven thing, I should drop it because that's not necessarily our thing. That's going to be driven by them. But I just wanted to ask that question. And then last last question I had is, since we've been talking about our internal communications and how important that was for us to get initiated and have people come to our meeting as well as city council knowing what we're doing. Do we have it in the plans to share this toolbox with city council, because they actually own the majority of the property that's down in the CRA now? So they know these as well. Are we planning to have some kind of communication that way?
I would say that this is a very important point. The city manager got this about a month or so ago, or two ago, because he asked for it to see it for that very reason. So I would believe that he's going to take that and discuss that with the city council on it. So we will run that by him and see how he wants to manage that. But he has been fully briefed on this document, what it means, and he's very excited about the possibilities of utilizing some of these techniques as well.
Out of self-preservation, then, I would just like to, whoever is discussing this with the city manager, which I know we're not supposed to, it's either our Bill or yourself. I would like it stressed that this is work that's done by the CRA and wouldn't have been done this quick had we not existed. So I just would like, if anybody on council gets this, that they understand that the CRA has value and this is coming from us. That's, I'm extremely stressed that this department these changes aren't being taken serious. And I think it's very important, if we're going to share it, which I want to do, that at least hear that it came from us.
I'm going to take it another step, Francis, that hope I haven't stepped out of bounds on this one, but you know, we have the external communications process, and I've already begun, based on a wonderful list that Bill gave me, to have conversations with some of the key property owners and developers to find out what plans they have with their property and what obstacles they face for development, which then leads back into this. And I haven't said this directly, but many of them know and will see, based on the public records that we have developed this incentive toolbox. So I'm hopeful that it starts to develop interest within the property owner, and I believe that it will. I haven't said directly we're going to have an incentive toolbox, but they know it's coming and know it's part of what we're working on. So internally and externally, I'm excited about that.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Art.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Jeff.
Okay, just on that last point, the external communication, this is more of an anecdote, but I play golf with a fellow who has a condo down in the South First Street in the area that hasn't been improved yet or had their utility work done. And he's aware of what I do in the upcoming project, but he was talking to a bunch of his neighbors, and he said not a single one, property owners, knew that the CRA existed. So I think there's an opportunity in the communication to maybe have some general public education of what the CRA is and what it includes and what it can do.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's in the external communications plan that we want to work to implement with as soon as we can. Absolutely.
Okay. Can I add one point to that, Jeff, before you ask your next question?
Sure.
The just by the description, I'm assuming the gentleman's somewhere between 11th Avenue South and 4th Avenue South. That would actually, a little CRA education could be the introductory component to the public meetings we have that actually get to the specific design, because they don't know us, they don't know about, I think they may know that, hey, we're in between 4th has been approved and 11th has been approved. And I think they generally know what's going to happen, but there will be detailed outreach meetings specific to the design of their project streets. And that could, the first part of that could easily be a little CRA tutorial about, hey, this is why you're getting it. You know, your increased tax value is helping to pay for this. So that's actually, that's a good idea.
That's a good idea. That's a great idea. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, the second thing, I was just curious if you mentioned some facade renovation grants had been done in the past. Can you give us a couple of examples of that?
Bill.
I can't specifically because Mr. Lindorf, my predecessor, managed. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes, sir. That I can get them some of the metrics for you. I can't tell you specifically right now because several of the buildings that I know benefited from that, the buildings are gone. I mean, it just happened. They were in business at the time. It was a facade improvement. It didn't relate to landscaping. Francis was on the board, I believe, when we funded the program, I believe every year the monies were exhausted, weren't they? So I think it was a fairly popular program. Sorry.
And I'll just add as well, it was also used for the lower income housing. At one point, those buildings are now gone as well, and it ended up being that where they ended up painting everything and whatnot, fixing those older buildings up. That's also a part, but that's not part of our area. But yes, it has been used in the past.
Okay, and my final question, I guess for Bill, is do we have this fast track permitting in effect right now for projects down here? Because we have some projects that seem to be at the permit stage for quite a bit of time.
Well, I'm not aware of that. No, we don't have an expedited permit process, but I'm also not aware of any projects that are bogged down because of lack of permit. It's typically they get permits.
For example, the hotel that they tore down that they were going to renovate.
That was, they've got a building permit. They've had a building permit. And
so we've done everything.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. More over and then some. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm trying to catch up with some notes, so I'm not leaving the screen.
Sam, did you have a question?
Yes, I had a concern about our return on investment. I know the retail enhancement grant. I know that's the grant, but I think there's a caveat there where they will have to repay that grant if certain conditions aren't met. Maybe that's too many details that I'm looking at here, but
no, it's there. You want to make sure that they stay there, and every year they're there, a portion of it burns off. But if for some reason they go out of business, which you want to make sure doesn't happen, then they would have to pay it back. Now, there's two parts of that. The retail enhancement grant frequently goes to the owner of the property, the retail tenant. It just has to be passed on to the tenant. So one has to presume then that the owner of the property, even though the tenant leaves, is still going to be there and can be held responsible to recover whatever is remaining on the recoverable grant loan to pay it back. Does that help?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, comments, Gary?
Jim, thank you for putting this together. It's very helpful to start to get your arms around the tools that we have. The challenge I see for the agency is that I think we need to go through this list and determine which ones are really items that we want to use for future development or use with developers. I don't think every single one of these is appropriate necessarily, but certain ones are. And if we could put a little bit more detail into the specific ones we want to use, and then take that information to city council, city manager to get their concurrence, I think that might be a way to proceed. Rather, because at some point we've got to decide which one of these options we really want to use. But one thing I didn't hear in your presentation was anything about something like gap financing. Would that be something that the TIF funds could be used for to provide, a developer?
Yeah, the gap financing is applied with the retail enhancement, but the gap financing is applied with the REV grant and some of the other grants, the commercial development grants, the commercial development loans that go in there. Typically, gap financing is a little bit different, and I didn't talk about that specifically. There are other programs that can come into play for gap financing. LISC, Local Investment Support Corporation, is a great source of providing gap financing as necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And
along the same lines,
gap financing is really tricky in terms of ensuring you get the money paid back. That's more of a direct loan as opposed to waiting to participate. No, I did not talk about that because it's really tricky.
And the other option of, going and getting bond financing for projects such that we've got the lowest financing costs, possibly available for a developer.
You can't really do that, particularly for a property development, for municipal financing on that. You can use bond financing and use TIF to financing to create bonds, to do some of the other items to create value. But to give you an example, we talked about the infrastructure site development support. If I'm a developer and I'm going to build a hotel and it's $20 million or whatever it is, 30 million, pick a number, and you've got the site, and within that $30 million, I know I've got to have infrastructure work done. I've got to have improved utilities. I've got to have transportation improvements.
Right.
I've got to, whatever that whole list might be, I got to take care of water management issues. Whatever that number is, let's say it's 20% of the total cost. That can be taken off of his financing obligation and be paid for.
Right. Right.
So that to me is a better way to approach that than trying to get heavily involved in, and TIF can bond money. We got plenty of cash, but you can use a TIF bond to help come up with sources if you need a lot of cash right now and aren't able to pay it as a pay-go ways and means. But that to me is a better way to approach it than getting heavily involved in a complex financial arrangement for a project.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that came to mind is
got to finance the whole thing with his equity. And suddenly he's looking at, I said 20 million. So instead he's now looking at 16 or 15. That makes it a lot more feasible for him to produce the project because we want to put it back on him and not take his financing risk.
There were just a couple other quick thoughts that came to mind as I was looking through your document. And one was, some kind of benefits for sustainability, designing for LEED and things to that extent, I think would be beneficial for us as a CRA to really take a look at for future projects, along with, one of the things that makes certain cities more development desirable are those that can provide the high-speed technology systems that are needed for businesses today. I know it's a little bit of a long shot for little Jacksonville Beach, but it'd be interesting if we could put a backbone system in that would benefit the businesses in the area and would entice people to come to the downtown area to develop. Just a thought.
And I suppose my thoughts have been to start with your first point, Gary, is that I know we're going to come back and talk about this, the context of the downtown plan and looking at South Beach as well. To your point, looking at those objectives and the board coming to a decision-making process of what you want to focus on and then seeing these are the best incentives to work to make that happen. That flows back to some of the comments that Francis made last couple of meetings on the plan and how we tied that back together because that's a very important part of it as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Jim, thank you very much. I guess this leads us right to item number B, which Bill or Jim, which one of you guys want to talk about that meeting with the city manager?
Bill, me?
I'll start out with, we did have a discussion with the city manager specifically about the point that Francis had raised about that her desire would be to have the program manager accountable to the city manager as opposed to the planning and development director. He fairly quickly and succinctly said that that was not his plan at all. He's also vetting the new planning and development director, and that's part of what he's vetting in the who they want to get the candidate to replace me, is that they have CRA experience and they could perform that capacity for oversight of the CRA program manager. So he was just very clear to us that he didn't agree with that.
He did say that, but he also put it, if I may,
sure,
because I was in that.
Yeah.
He also put it in this context, which did make some sense. If you look at a straight span of control management system, he has got a lot of people that report directly to him right now. And in his mind, the way he's looking at this with the planning and development director, as Bill outlined that, and that this new person reporting back up to that way is better. He's got an easier way to manage what's going on in the system. He said, I've got X number of people that are direct reports, and that takes all my time. I've got to depend upon someone like it's Bill and then this new person to come back to him to make sure the work gets done and I can hold people accountable. He's also very clear to say, and I absolutely believe him on this, that when these new folks come into play and the new folks are hired, he's going to be spending a lot of time on them anyway. I mean, I got the sense that he'll be meeting while on the organizational chart, it would go from the program manager to the planning development director to him. But I think he was very clear to say that he would be meeting with them together on CRA issues. Is that a fair representation, gentlemen?
Yes, that's exactly what he said. He said the reality is for the first 12 to 15 months, he's going to be meeting with both of them anyway. Questions? Francis, and then Gary.
I just still don't, I understand that that's his stance. I still don't understand the reasoning for it. I understand that he has the right to do his flow structure how he wants. And maybe the answer is in his mind, possibly the CRA is a development agency. Therefore, we go through the, planning development department. Maybe that's how he's thinking his flow chart. But me personally, from when this CRA was originally developed, it was its own chair at that table. So I know I don't have the right to really, that was what I was asking for, is what is the flow chart and reasoning for it? Because the CRA was originally designed to be its own. So it only became part of the development director's responsibility when our past city manager condensed departments. So I still don't feel like I got an answer other than he just doesn't want to, but that's the answer we got. But
I'm going to say, if I may, Mr. Chairman, it isn't what he doesn't want to. He was simply defining the management approach to make it easier so that when the program manager is doing something, that they've got someone that they could talk to immediately, like the planning and development director, instead of having to wait to get to him when he's got I don't know how many people he's got that are direct reports now, trying to figure out a ways and means to get to him when things have to be done. I think
which I can understand that, because you got another development person talking to another development person.
And he's got so many other people on direct reports. I think that's what I heard him say.
All right. Thank you guys for asking.
Gary.
Jim, would you just give everybody an update of where we are with these identification of individuals for this position?
I got to go to Bill on that, Gary.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
My discussions with the city manager, not the HR director, I haven't discussed it with the HR director yet, have been primarily just on the planning and development director hire. I anticipate, and it would be my desire that we get the P&D director on board just before we get the program manager for the next meeting, or I can reach out by email and let you know as soon as I get from the HR director how many applications we received. I think the initial period is over. If not, it's coming to an end. It may be the end of this month. It may be November 30th.
It's the 20th.
November 20th.
Okay, yeah, Taylor may know. But I do know we've gotten some responses. I don't know about the quality of them. They haven't shared them with me. And honestly, I don't know if they will. I may not be part of the selection committee. I would think I would if I'm still here, you know, acting in my current position. I would think I'd be part of that, but it could be something that they cede over to my successor if he's on board at the time. But I can get you an update on that. I don't have one for you right now, though.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jeff. You're muted, Jeff.
I'm sorry. Are we going to get an opportunity to interview the top candidates? Or is that?
There will at least, to my knowledge, be an ability or an opportunity to meet with them. I don't believe you're part of the formal interview process, but you will at least meet the shortlisted candidates. Yes, sir. That's definitely.
And can have input, I would suggest.
Say that again? I'm sorry.
Input.
Couldn't hear you, Jim. Say that again.
I said, and have input and comments.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure if you meet with them, we're going to hear what everybody thinks about them anyway. So I think that's a foregone conclusion. But yeah, that's part of
Gary,
why we.
Did I see your hand go up? Gary?
Well, I just wanted to add, this person is ultimately going to report to the CRA. I think we as the CRA need to participate in the interview process. I mean, for that person not to have contact with the individual members of this board during their selection process, I think would be is a problem as far as I see it.
I understand that. I understand your opinion about that. However, keep in mind, he is a city employee. He's part of the city hiring process. He is. You may not like that, but that's how we hire employees.
But this
Anyone else?
That's ridiculous.
Anyone else? All right. That's everything we have on discussion items. Mr. Mann.
Just a little recap about what we're going to do at the next meeting, the December meeting. We went through the consolidated downtown plan with the excellent materials that Francis gave us. I keep going back to that book all the time because it is well organized. But we've primarily focused just on that 4th Avenue corridor. I think in December, I think we could kind of flush out the rest of the corridors, are a little more straightforward. But I'd like to go ahead and get that done. And as a group, I've already had one of our regular speakers, one of our public speakers that comes to the meeting has asked, well, has the CRA decided whether or not we're going to come up with a new vision plan? Is there a 3rd iteration? Are we happy with the existing one? But we need to go ahead and come to full closure on the vetting of that consolidated work from the Shepherd Group. That's one thing. The other thing is 2 of our current members on the screen right now, our terms are up in the end of December. The appointments will be considered by City Council at either the 12/7 or the 12/21 council meeting. So that's on our radar. I just didn't want to think that we've had the interviews for all of our open board positions. So we'll be ready to consider the appointment for the CRA going forward for the 2 positions that expire in December. And that's
last meeting we had, I asked you guys to go look at a piece of property.
Thank you, Art.
Have you all had a chance to go take a look at that piece of property? And what are your thoughts? Who wants to go first?
Excuse me, Art, through the chair, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if Pete Hill, I believe he might be wanting to speak towards this. I'm not sure if you can see that he's an attendee. Not that it matters right now, but courtesy of the floor, we may possibly have a panelist that wants to speak.
Sure. Well, I just want to hear what the board members say first. If he's still on the line, we'll let him speak for a couple of minutes at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
I don't see any reason for us to keep it.
I second that. It needs to stay residential, I think.
Gary? You're muted.
I think I pretty much voiced my opinion in reference to that piece of property before, because it sits back in a real residential area, also backs up to Riptide. And there's really no other appropriate use other than residential for it. So I think we as the CRA ought to consider disposing of that piece of property.
Sam?
Yes, unfortunately, I did not get a chance to look at that property. I'll have to defer to the members of the board, and I will trust your judgment on that.
Well, Bill, what's the process from here moving forward? I know we can't take any official actions now, but you've already heard the five of us agree to move forward with letting it go. What do we do from here?
I would like to discuss with the city manager what the city's posture is on also liquidating, putting back on the market the Sunshine Court lots to see if we want to do that together. And I think that will define the process. If they do not want to do anything with the Sunshine Court lots at this point, the first thing we need to do is get an appraisal, and we can decide as a group how we want to vet different bids on it. I'm sure if Mr. Hill's online and he wants to talk in a minute, he may have an idea about how he thinks the process would go. But it could be sealed bids. There's any number of ways we can do it. First thing we need to do is get an appraisal on it. And if we can't decide, we can't make an action on that tonight. We can in December because we'll meet in person. If that's the will of the group, we'll do that, and I'll get an appraisal ordered.
Is it our choice on how we decide to dispose of it? If we want to do sealed bids or open option or what have you?
Well, statute is very general about disposal and acquisition of properties. They don't guide us that far. And to my knowledge, we haven't, I don't think I've got any historical record with our CRA where we've disposed of any property. But it's out there. I can get it. I can get on the FRA website and see what the in vogue manner is right now for doing property disposition. And I'll talk to our procurement officer as well, Lewis. That he's available for consult, so I can ask him as well.
Sam, if you get the opportunity between now and our next meeting, I'd encourage you to go out there and take a look at it, just out of curiosity.
Oh, absolutely.
Or you can just pull up a satellite picture of the map, and you can see there's residential houses, on every single side of that thing.
Oh, sure.
If you call me, I'll come take you over there.
Okay, no worries.
All right. So we're going to discuss that. Bill, also put that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yes, sir.
And let us know what the city manager had to say about disposal of that piece of property. Gary, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, you did. This was not in reference to that specific item. I've got something else I wanted to bring before the agency.
Sure.
Chandra, I don't know if you can put it up on the screen, the pages that I gave you the other day, but back in October, I met with Bill in Public Works, the city engineer, and we went over the outstanding South Beach projects, the ones that have been approved by the original plan for South Beach. And the list that you see in front of you, there's roughly 2 pages of it, but the list that you see in front of you is what the city engineer put together to identify what remaining projects are still out there in reference to South Beach. And of that, there's a total of roughly $19 million worth of projects still outstanding that need to be completed. Right now, in the capital improvement plan from fiscal year 2021 to 2025, it's only accounted for of a roughly $14.3 million. So there's still a fair amount of work that needs to be done down in the South Beach district. And I'm not sure I understand all of the numbers just yet. And I will try to get with Ashley and try to make sure that I understand how these numbers are flowing. But right now there seems to be, a shortfall over the next 5 fiscal years of roughly $5 million for the work that still needs to be done down in the South Beach district. And that does not include any additional items that I had brought up in my list back in February, which I know are not part of the plan, but would need additional approvals in order to move forward on those. But we still have a fair amount of work to do. I just wanted to kind of update the board members in reference to South Beach, and as I get more information, I'll continue to pass it on.
That's a good point, Gary, and that's also when we talked about the CRA wanting to be more actively involved in the budget process in January and February. That's the time not, well, the downtown's a little more prescriptive because we've got the huge infrastructure outlay, but that's the kind of discussion we can have. I'm envisioning maybe at the January meeting about getting some of those projects online, like the disposition of the CRA property at, the southwest corner of Jack's Drive, the city lots just north of that type of thing. So yeah, that's part of I envision that as part of the budget discussion the CRA has with my successor, the program manager and finance at the beginning of the year, at the kickoff of the budget process for next year.
Right. No, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that, I understand how the numbers are flowing, because at this time it's coming out of different documents, and I'm not sure I've got all of the information in front of me to fully follow everything. So, to get to a starting point, it would be good to get Ashley's input.
Bill, could you schedule Ashley coming to our meeting in January?
Yes, sir. Actually, I think that's going to happen. She and I are going to be speaking with that over the holidays about how that process goes forward, getting into the new year and kicking off the budget process. But yes, sir, I will.
And can you get these 2 sheets of papers to us and make sure Ashley has these things, and so she's reviewed these things so she can give us an informed opinion on why we would not just charge forward and knock out all $19 million of this stuff before we start giving half of it back to the Jacksonville?
Well, okay. Yes, sir. I'll get with that. I don't want to get too far into it. Yes, I will do that.
Bill, I understood that Bill, I had understood before I met with you and the city engineer that the city engineer, yourself, and Ashley had sat down and reviewed this list and kind of, confirmed that these are all remaining items, right?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, we're not having, after the last meeting we had on this project list. Yes, sir. I don't think there's any ambiguity about that. These are projects that are remaining valid CRA projects. The last vetting of that list took some of the projects that, for instance, the citywide sewer and stormwater and water master plans. The CRA, that's something the city does anyway. It's not appropriate for the CRA to be putting in a geographically proportionate share of that funding because that's city work anyway. So yes, sir. I don't believe this list will be whittled down anymore.
Right. Okay.
Well, Gary, this is great information. And Bill's going to make sure that Ashley's there to speak specifically to this. Something just happened to my computer. Hold on a second. Okay. Bill's going to make sure that she's there to speak specifically to this.
Yes, sir.
And we can go from there. We don't need to keep second guessing. We can get firsthand from both her and from the city manager why they want to do something different, and we can make that discussion. And my understanding is it's still our decision, so we can make an informed and intelligent decision at that point. Jim, did you have your hand up?
Just to ask Bill if he'd send me that list as well, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Chandra's got it for this PowerPoint, so it's easy to do. We'll get it to it.
One of the things I would just caution everybody about is that the numbers that you see here are numbers that were prorated from 2010 to 2020. So they're maybe ballpark guesses. My guess is that they're probably higher than what we're seeing as a total number, but that's something we'll ultimately have to get our arms around.
All right. Anything else? So we pretty much know what we're going to be dealing with in the next meeting that we have. Kendra, is that guy on the line? Does he want to speak to us?
I will verbally ask him if he would like to speak. I tried to do the chat session. He didn't answer, so I do not know if he's there. So I'll allow him to talk, and if he can, then we'll go from there.
And if not, we'll get him here in December.
Mr. Hill, can you hear us, and can you speak now?
Okay, I'm here.
Gotcha. We can hear you.
I'm sorry. We can hear you. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, this is Pete Hill, and my address is 1818 2nd Street. And I was interested in the Horn Court property. It sounds like you guys are willing to sell it, so that's great news for me. And hopefully we move forward with the bidding process. That's it.
Okay.
Art, we can't hear you at all. I can see you speaking, but I can't hear you for some reason.
Sorry, I was muted. Pete, I don't know if you heard us earlier, but Bill Mann said the process is next for both him to sit down with the city manager just to make sure that the city manager and or city council didn't have any long-term plans for that piece of property. And then from there, we figure out how to dispose of it. So we will definitely let you know. We have your information on however we choose to move forward. We'll inform you. We'll probably make that decision our next meeting in December, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right. Well, we appreciate you holding on for this meeting, and we appreciate your feedback.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? All right, fantastic. We are, Bill, when is our next meeting?
It is December the 16th, which is another Wednesday, and if 5 o'clock works for everybody to be live in the council chambers, we can have it in the council chambers.
5 o'clock, and we don't have any other overlaps with any other city stuff?
No, sir, that's why we did it on a Wednesday night. This is just happening.
Well,
our Board of Adjustment needs the legal training from our city attorney, so it was a fairly crucial meeting in my mind. They had a meeting last night, and they were all willing to come back tonight for a training session, so I think we were appropriately bumped, and I apologize for the confusion. But
that's quite all right. So we are planning on meeting on the 18th?
16th, 12/16, Wednesday, 12/16.
The 16th at 5 o'clock at
Yes,
City Hall.
Yes, sir.
All right. You guys all be safe, and we're adjourned.
Happy
Thank you all.
Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving.